Happy Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in and for choosing to spend some of your time with me. I'm Maria Milagros, and this is a little space I like to carve out to share different tips, tools, techniques, nuggets, stories, anecdotes, whatever I can to help us move the needle, even if it's 1 degree at a time, because progress is progress is progress is progress, to new levels of healthy and happy, whatever that means for who we are and where we are right now in our lives. During the month of August, I'm going to be talking about a couple of different ways that we can make sure that we're living congruent lives and that we're living aligned lives. And what I mean by that is that what we say is important and what we say is of value is actually what we're doing and how we're living. So when those two things line up, and it's magic, right? And I find that a lot of my coaching clients and a lot of people that I talk to after I speak at events, they want more information about how do I do that? How do I make those two things meet when I have to pay my bills and I have to keep my house clean and I have to do, yes, absolutely. And so I want to talk a little bit about priorities today. Okay, so when we're talking about priorities, it's important that, first of all, we know what they are. A lot of people have a nebulous idea about what their priorities are. And they're like, I think it's this, or maybe it's these two things, right? So sometimes the best thing you can do, and by sometimes I mean all the time, for me anyways, is to write it down. Get very clear about it. Write it in a journal, write it on a note on your computer. I don't care where you write it. Just write it down. What are your priorities? And then for real, jot them all down. Once you put them all down on paper or on your computer, then you go through the process of rearranging them. Rearrange your priorities and decide what's my number one priority, and then what comes second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on and so forth. This way, it helps us get clearer about where our priorities should be, where most of our time and energy and true attention should be, to make sure that we're maximizing that top priority, right? And then, of course, list them all out. Then I would suggest taking maybe your top 3 to 5, depending on how disconnected you are from your list, right? If you're really disconnected, stick with 3. If you're kind of disconnected, maybe you can go with 5. I wouldn't recommend more than 5 to start. And what I mean by start is this. Look at your life and then look at this list and ask yourself truly, like for real, like if I'm being totally honest with myself, like for real, am I using my most valuable assets, my time and energy, in alignment with what I say are my priorities? Because a lot of people I talk to and I ask them what the priorities are, and they are quick with their list. Bah, 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 bah. I'm like, fantastic. When was the last time you? And they're like, And then I'm like, okay, let's move to the second thing on your list. When was the last time that you? And they're like, okay, so are those ideas of what you want your priorities to be? No, those are my priorities. No, they're not, honey. They are not your priorities unless you are actually dedicating time and energy to those things or people or experiences or what have you. That's real. And I also want to say this. Our priorities change over time. When I was in college, my number one priority was to finish college, right? That was it. That was my number one priority. My number 2 priority was to make money to pay my bills so I can finish college. That was my number 2 priority, right? So college always came first. I would always carve out time for studying. I always carved out time for my tutoring. I always carved out time for writing a report. I always carved out time. That came first. It was my number 1 priority. My calendar and my checkbook reflected that college was my number 1 priority at that time in my life. I would skip family Thanksgivings to get paid double time to go to work so that I had the money to be able to pay for college was my number 1 priority. You see what I'm saying? It wasn't healthy. Not at all. But it was true and reflective. My life was reflective of what I said my number 1 priority was at that time. Again, not healthy. No balance. Well, I had a little bit of balance. But for the most part, college, work. That was it. Stay alive. Those are my 3 things. And then as time evolved, and like now I'm a mom and I have a child, and the reality is that my number 1 priority now, because she's much older, and it has been for a really long time, honestly, is my health. Because my overall health has to come first. My mental health, my spiritual health, my physical health, they have to come first. And I make decisions that align with that first and foremost, because I recognize that if I'm not in a healthy place mentally, emotionally, or physically, or spiritually, then I do not have the true capacity to show up the way that I want to from a space of love and joy for my daughter, for my family, for my friends, for my clients. That has to be my number one priority. And it's not necessarily written in my calendar, but when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I do is dedicate my time and energy to myself. I anchor myself in, I eat my breakfast, I get my stretches in or my yoga. Sometimes I teach fitness classes in the morning, depending on what day it is, right? So like, that is my priority, yes, through and through. And then throughout the course of the day, a lot of my choices reflect that that is my priority, right? So I want you to really think about, what are all the priorities? Put them down on paper, rearrange them to what is the most important, and then what comes under that. And then take a look at your life and ask yourself, take a look at your calendar, take a look at your checkbook. I remember many, many years ago, there was a pastor who said, show me your calendar and show me your checkbook, and I'll show you your priorities. And I remember, because that checked me. And I thought, ooh, yes, I am not making the choices that align with what I say are my priorities in my life, which means I'm frustrated, I feel stuck, I feel overwhelmed, and I feel like I'm not congruent with who I say I want to be, or like what I want to be, or what kind of life I want to live. And because the choices that I'm making are subpar compared to the priorities that I say that are important to me. Oh no, honey, we got to get it together. That's what I said to myself. And so I started making different choices. And what I did was, y'all know, if you've been following me, I carry little pieces of paper and postcards. I have multicolored postcards. I carry them in my wallet. And when I find that there's a shift in a priority or shift in an intention or something, I'll write it up. And I'll take a picture of it and I'll have it on my phone and I'll put it in my purse or put it in my wallet and I take it with me. And when I try to remember as much as possible, like, this is our new priority, this is our shift, this is where we're headed. So I'll try to pull it out as much as possible and look at it. Or if I pull up my phone, it's right there, I can see it. And that way I'm like, are my choices aligning with my priorities? Are my choices aligning with my mental health, my spiritual health, my emotional health, my physical health? Are my choices aligning with my making sure I have a healthy relationship with my daughter? Are my choices aligning with making sure I have healthy relationships with my friends and family? Who, if my friends are my family, right? So I just say my family. Are my relationships aligning with my business and making an impact in the world? Are my choices aligning with my priorities? No? Then that's not going to be a choice for me. Yes? Then let's go, right? So it's a way that initially the work feels like a little bit, I got to write this out. Yes, you do. Because if you're not getting clear about it, then you're not getting clear about where you're headed. And then you're going to make choices that are going to be all over the place. And that's where we feel disconnected and incongruent and stuck, because we're all over the place. So get clear. What are your priorities? And then look at your calendar, look at your checkbook, and ask yourself, am I truly making choices that align with what I say are my priorities? And if not, what small shifts can you start to create to make sure that your choices do align? Maybe it's carrying the postcard just as a constant awareness and reminder, because we can't make different choices if we're not aware, right? So maybe it's that. And then constantly just being in a space of bringing yourself back to your priorities. And once you do that, you're going to find that you're going to feel a lot more connected to yourself. You're going to feel a lot more connected to your own knowing and your own growth. You're going to feel a lot more connected to your desires and your dreams. And you're going to start creating your life rather than settling for your life, because who wants that, right? A lot of people live that and then they end up unhappy. So let's get a little more intentional about creating our lives. And this is one way to start doing that. Let me know if you have any questions. You know how to reach me. Put it in the comments. What are your priorities? You can share them in the comments. You can shoot me an email just for accountability's sake. If you do shoot me an email, please give me a couple of days to get back to you. I do get a lot of emails. I'm sending you so much light and love. I hope that this was helpful. If you know someone who can benefit from it, please share it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Stop playing around. Make it a priority. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Peace.